Donald Trump's reckless power plant gamble against Iran now threatens to unleash chaos far beyond its borders. In a dramatic ultimatum over the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. president has essentially told Iran to open the waterway on Washington's terms or face an all-out assault on its grid. The warning once issued by slain Iranian security chief Ali Larijani now seems to be coming back to haunt Donald Trump. Ali Larijani had chillingly cautioned that if Washington dared attack Iran's power grid, the entire region would go dark in minutes. Despite Trump's bluster and talk of obliteration, it is Tehran that appears to hold the real switch. Donald Trump has now openly threatened to obliterate Iran's power plants in response to Tehran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz, escalating the conflict from a naval standoff into a direct war on the country's civilian infrastructure. On March 21st, the U.S. president issued a stark 48-hour deadline, demanding that Iran fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face devastating strikes, effectively turning one of the world's key energy arteries into a ticking time bomb. This hard pivot to direct threats against Iran came after Trump first tried to shift responsibility onto nations who use the Strait of Hormuz, telling them to police and guard the route themselves while Washington pretended it did not need it. Even before this ultimatum, Trump had already floated the idea of outright destroying Iran's power grid, hinting that the U.S. could target the country's electrical lifelines in a move that would amount to economic and humanitarian warfare. Boasting to reporters, Trump claimed the U.S. military could take apart Iran's entire electric capacity within just 1 hour, suggesting a strike so severe it would cripple the country for decades and push the entire region toward catastrophe. Trump said, and I quote, "If Iran doesn't fully open, without threat, the Strait of Hormuz, within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first." Iran answered Trump's power plant threats with a stark warning of its own, signaling that U.S. and Israeli energy infrastructure across the region would be placed firmly in the crosshairs if Washington dared to strike Iran's grid. Iranian outlet Fars News revived the words of slain security chief Ali Larijani, reminding the world that Tehran had long warned any attack on its electricity system would trigger a punishing response far beyond Iran's borders. Larijani had bluntly stated that if the U.S. ever hit Iran's power grid, the entire region would be blacked out within half an hour, a threat that now hangs ominously over every new American escalation. Tehran has already shown it is willing to hit back at energy infrastructure in the Gulf, launching retaliatory strikes after an attack on its South Pars gas field and proving that its threats are not empty rhetoric. IRGC said, and I quote, "Following previous warnings, should Iran's fuel and energy infrastructure be violated by the enemy, all energy, information technology, and desalination infrastructure belonging to the U.S. and the regime in the region will be targeted." Among Iran's biggest power assets is the massive Damavand power plant, with a capacity of around 2,868 megawatts, a symbol of the country's domestic resilience and a potential high-value target in any U.S. strike plan. Major facilities such as the Kerman power plant, at roughly 1,910 megawatts, and the Ramin steam power station, at around 1,890 megawatts, underline how deeply integrated Iran's grid is into the daily life of tens of millions of people. Iran's only nuclear power plant at Bushehr generates about 1,000 megawatts of electricity, and reports that a missile recently landed nearby have raised alarm over just how close this conflict is edging to a potential nuclear-adjacent disaster. Iran has effectively shut down traffic through the Strait of Hormuz in response to the war launched by the U.S. and Israel, using its geographic leverage to squeeze global oil flows and challenge Western dominance at sea. Tehran insists the strait remains open to neutral countries but closed to U.S. and allied vessels, turning Hormuz into a geopolitical filter that punishes its enemies while rewarding states that keep their distance. All of this unfolds even as U.S. Central Command claims to have degraded Iran's ability to strike ships in the area, creating a stark contrast between Washington's triumphant rhetoric and the reality of a still-blocked waterway. CENTCOM says this degradation followed heavy bombing of an underground Iranian facility that stored anti-ship cruise missiles and launchers, an operation meant to neutralize Tehran's maritime strike capabilities. Despite these claims of success, Trump has since appealed to NATO allies and even China to help secure Hormuz, signaling that the U.S. does not want to shoulder the risks of this confrontation alone. Leading European powers have so far ruled out sending direct support while the war continues, leaving Washington more isolated and reinforcing the sense that Trump's high-stakes gamble could backfire spectacularly.
You said I'm opening the Strait of Hormuz It's a simple military maneuver.
Very simple.
Yeah, but what did you mean by that?
It's a simple military maneuver. It's relatively safe, but you need a lot of help in the sense of you need ships, you need volume. And NATO could help us, but they so far haven't had the courage to do so. And others could help us, but you know, we don't use it. You know, at a certain point, it'll open itself at a certain point. But we've defeated the enemy, and they are an enemy. They're a sick group of people. The leadership is gone, the Navy is gone, the Air Force is gone, the anti-aircraft equipment that they have, the radar they have is all gone, everything's gone. The strait itself, the actual strait, how are you? Hi. The strait itself is, we're doing a good job, but it would be nice if the countries, including China, if the countries that use it, China uses it 90% of their energy, Japan is 95% of the energy. It would be nice if those countries would get involved.
But what did you call it?
What? I thought you did a good job yesterday.
President, starting at the American bases in Europe, Lindsey Graham has asked for you to reconsider the American bases in Spain, in Germany, after what they have done in the Strait of Hormuz. What's your take?
Well, it deserves. He's right about asking that, and I think NATO's gone down a long way because they haven't. I mean, they should be helping with the Strait. They get much of their energy from the Strait of Hormuz, and if Lindsey Graham said that, and don't forget, he was the big NATO guy for a while, and now he's not. And a lot of senators and congressmen, they're very upset with the fact that NATO has done nothing.
Pope Leo is calling for a ceasefire in the Middle. Pope Leo is calling for a ceasefire in the Middle East and to reopen dialogue. What do you say to the Pope?
Well,
sir?
look, we can have dialogue, but I don't want to do a ceasefire. You know, you don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side. They don't have a Navy. They don't have an Air Force. They don't have any equipment they don't have any spotters. They don't have anti-aircraft. They don't have radar, and their leaders have all been killed at every level. We're not looking to do that. Thank you. Thank you.